And honestly, I don't know all the answers. I don't know all the practices. I don't know how to do all the things to counter the demands and the patterns of this world, because I'm so entrenched in society and the patterns of this world and the technology we have and all the things that we have access to and at any given moment, and are so engulfed in that I'm like, how do I practice Sabbath? Because I can read ancient Israel history and I can read all that and going, well, that's good for you, but man, you didn't have any computers, devices, you didn't have any of that. It's one thing for you to practice it back then, but what about us? How do we do this? And realizing that's not just for me to figure out, but that we can discover this together and practice this together. I love that. So my challenge this week, I want to make a challenge this week for all of us to discover this together, that the Jews would celebrate it in one way. So I looked up and I was like, well, how do Jewish people today celebrate Sabbath? And this is what I discovered. I read a bunch of stuff, but here's a quote from Wikipedia. And Wikipedia said this about Shabbat, which Shabbat is the Hebrew word for Sabbath. Shabbat is a festive day. I was like, that's interesting. It's not solitude and silence, and festive is like a festival. That's a party. It's a festive day when Jews exercise their freedom. And I was like, interesting. They identified as this is a freedom thing. From the regular labors of everyday life, it offers an opportunity to contemplate the spiritual aspects of life and to spend time with family. It's a festival celebrated as a gift. It's about freedom. It's a day to refocus on God, recenter your trust in Him, and it's a day to be spent with family and with friends. And how do the modern Jews start Sabbath? So Sabbath to the Jewish people begins at, just before sunset on Friday night and finishes just after sunset on Saturday. So it's about 25-hour period. And what they do is that they start the Sabbath, modern day Jews still practicing historically what their ancestors did, is they start it with a party. They start it with a meal. And they start it with a meal, not just with family, but with friends. And it's kind of a community meal. And they get together and they do this. And I thought, isn't that powerful? Because in that, they're setting aside time to put and to rest and to recreate. But part of that recreation and how God created us as human beings is that it's meant to be reconnecting with God, but also reconnecting with others. So what if, and this is just a challenge, just a thought, saying, hey, those of you who are in small groups, what if this week, we just tried it. What if this week, Friday night or whatever, if you can do Friday night, do Friday night. If you have another night that you meet and you want to do that, but what if this week we just started by having a meal together and celebrating and do it with your devices off, with the focus of connecting to one another and doing that and saying, this is one way that we can discover something together. And the Jews would have on Friday night, they would have a meal together. And then Saturday would kind of be, they would start the morning with solitude and silence and reconnecting and re-centering on God and re-anchoring their trust in God. And then they would spend time with family and more one-on-one time with children or just as a family unit together, kind of in quiet, all the rest of it. And then they have 2 other festival meals. They like their food. All right. And it's good food. And they have a meal, big celebration family meal mid-Saturday. And then they conclude Sabbath with another big dinner party on the Saturday. And that's how they do that together because God gave it them together. It's a day to be spent with family and friends. It's like, oh, okay. And it's okay, introverts. You can spend quiet time too. That's good. But come on, it's about spending and reconnecting. Because how many know in our society today, how many know in my family, we got kids going off to this sport and to that activity and over here and all the rest of it. But imagine if we had a day where we could have a meal together and just focus on one another and have a day where we spent time with one another and did that for the purpose of reconnecting. At the same time, having a time where you just reconnect with God every single week. It's a rhythm that is healthy for you. It's healthy for the family unit. It's healthy for your relationship with God. It also rejuvenates